Okay, significant housekeeping today and a significant afterward. And new music, as you may have noticed, courtesy of Sophie Tucker. Thank you to the band. Okay, so I have an announcement to make about a change to the podcast going forward. As most of you know, the show has relied on audience support for several years, ever since I realized I was allergic to running ads. But it's finally become clear to me that the support model is broken, probably in principle. The ad model is also broken, but for very different reasons. First, let me say that those of you who've been supporting the podcast are total heroes. You are the reason why I've been able to grow it into the platform it's become. So I want to thank you for that. I consider myself extraordinarily lucky to have you. And I doubt there's a podcaster out there for whom the support model has worked better. But it still isn't working the way that I'd hoped. The percentage of people who support the show has never climbed beyond the single digits. And I now have several years of data on this. There seems to be some law of behavioral economics at work here. So those of you who have supported the show are true outliers, and that's awesome. But the psychological reality is that we've all grown used to an internet that is almost entirely subsidized by ads. And the negative effects of the ad model are now legion. It has undermined our politics. It has nearly destroyed journalism. It has given us clickbait and insane privacy violations and cancel culture. It is true to say that almost everything that is wrong with our digital lives, and much that's now wrong with our society, can be traced to this business model. And of course, I've talked about this in several episodes of the podcast, with people like Tristan Harris, and Jaron Lanier, and Douglas Rushkoff, and Renee DiResta, Zeynep Tufekci, Roger McNamee. I've covered this a lot, and the problem isn't going away anytime soon. And one insidious consequence of the ad model that is especially relevant here is that it has anchored everyone to the expectation that most digital content should be free, or nearly free, forever. And every content creator who tries to build a business without ads feels this force of gravity, pulling everything down to zero. And I can now say from experience that even real success down this path terminates in a broken business model. So, I'm changing the model and turning the Making Sense podcast into a subscription service. If you're already a supporter of the show, nothing will change. You just need to put our RSS feed into your favorite podcasting app so that you get the subscriber content. The instructions for doing this can be found on your subscriber content page on my site once you're logged in. It just takes a minute to do, and if you need help, just email support@samharris.org. For non-subscribers, beginning with this episode, all episodes of the podcast will be half episodes. So non-subscribers will get the first part of the conversation, but they won't get the second. And the first part won't be edited in a way that makes it seem sufficient. It won't be sufficient. The point is that if you really care about listening to this podcast, you'll need to subscribe through my website. Now, all of you know that I never want money to be the real reason why someone can't get access to my digital content. This has always been true for my podcast, and it's been true for the Waking Up app since we first launched. If someone can't afford the app, they need only send an email to support@wakingup.com, and we give them a free year subscription. And if their luck hasn't changed by the end of the year, they just need to send another email. That will also be our policy with the podcast. So if you really can't afford a monthly or annual subscription to samharris.org, just send an email to support@samharris.org, and we'll give you a free year's membership on the site, which will give you access to all the podcasts and AMAs and other bonus content. But for everyone else, this is the moment where you need to decide whether to continue the journey with me. And frankly, to help me decide how much of my time I should spend podcasting. The podcast has to function like a real media business, and that means it has to make sense in light of all the other things I could be doing with my time. It can't become an expensive opportunity cost. So I need to get out of this uncanny valley where countless numbers of you tell me that you find what I'm doing here to be incredibly valuable, and you urge me to spend more time on this, and you continually suggest guests for the podcast or topics I should explore. But more than 90% of you have also told me, tacitly at least, that you expect the podcast to be free forever. That doesn't make sense. So, going forward, the Making Sense podcast will function just as my app does, as a subscription service. And then I'll know exactly what it's worth to everyone. And then I'll be able to spend my time accordingly. Again, thank you for listening. It really is an honor to do this work. And once again, to all of you who have supported the show up to this point, when you didn't have to, I'm especially grateful because you've made this podcast possible. And wherever it goes from here is largely due to your help.